Okay. Mm-hmm. Do you want me to go ahead? Which one? E and F. And we'll give three. Okay. All right. Good evening. We'll call together the June 14th meeting of the Stillwater Planning Commission. The first items on the agenda will be public hearings, and the first item is item A, which is specific use permit 22-02.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jacqueline Porter, the City Planner, presenting for the Community Development Department. The first item being presented is a request for a specific use permit at 135 South Main Street. The SOP is for a medical marijuana dispensary. The subject property is located on the east side of South Main between Maple Avenue and Elm. Here's an aerial map of the proposed, or the subject property. Across the street is House of Dark, located west of South Main. There's a bakery located to the north, and Jones Addition is the residential subdivision to the east. Here's a Google Street View looking east on South Main at the subject property as of 3, how about March? We'll go March of 21. It was a medical marijuana dispensary before. They are now getting a new business license. So it's a new license, so it's coming back to you for the new person. So here's the zoning map. It is currently zone CG, and the surrounding to the north, west, and south is CG, and then to the east is residential. Here's an overview of the future land use map of the 2030 comprehensive plan. The map is to assist in forecasting uses in the community. The subject property is proposed for commercial use, as well as the properties adjacent to the south Main Street. Low density is proposed to the east of the subject property. Are there any questions for staff?
Any questions from the commissioners? Okay, we don't see any. Thank you. At this time, we'd like to call for the applicant and/or their representative to come forward and state anything you'd like to share with the commission. If you would, please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Josh Wilson. I'm with Blue Sky Buds, and we're hoping to open a dispensary here. Don't really know what to say, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay. Chelsea, did you get an address? I'm sorry, could you say your address again, your home address?
7707 South Prairie.
Thank you.
South in Stillwater.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant from the commissioners? No? Okay, I don't think we have any. Thank you so much.
All right, thank y'all.
Okay. At this time, I'll ask if there's anyone else in the audience this evening that would like to speak in favor of this item. Seeing none, I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak in opposition of this item. Okay. Seeing none, we'll ask staff to return and present alternatives for us, please.
All right, I do have a finding slide. Oklahoma state law allows for medical marijuana facilities. The Land Development Code allows the use of the medical marijuana dispensaries in commercial general zoning districts with a specific use permit. Parking is sufficient for the intended use. And then the alternatives. accept findings and recommend that the city council approve the proposed specific use permit as presented, accept findings and recommend the city council approve the proposed specific use with conditions, noting what conditions are being recommended, find that the specific use is not an appropriate use for the property based upon the impacts to the surrounding vicinity, and do not recommend that the city council approve the request. Find that the additional information or discussion is needed prior to making a recommendation and table the request to a certain date.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, any discussion or perhaps a motion?
I'd make a motion to accept the findings and recommend that the city council approve the proposed specific use permit as presented.
I can second that.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a map amendment. This is MA 22-06.
All right. The second item being presented tonight is a request for a map amendment located at 923 South Lowry from light industrial to commercial business. Here's an area map of the subject property at the corner of Lowry and 10th Avenue. The subject property is the location of Keystone Engineering. To the east of the property is the City of Stillwater Recreational Center, and to the north is Tiny Paw Kitten Rescue. Here's a street view looking east on Lowry. The property is currently zoned light industrial. To the north and to the east of the property is zoned public. South is zoned small single-family residential. Commercial business can be located to the west. This slide contains the images of the future land use map, part of the 2030 comprehensive plan. Future land use maps are used to forecast desired uses in the community at the time of the comprehensive plan was adopted. As you can see, west of Lowry is the proposed to be commercial, to the south industrial, to the north and east public, as the subject property is proposed to be industrial at the time of the adopted comprehensive plan. The request to rezone to commercial business would allow the current non-conforming structure to be a conforming structure. CB also is applicable zoning since it is a neighboring zoning in the immediate area. The applicant is here. Kelly Harris is here. If you have any questions for her at this time, does the commissioners have questions for staff?
Any questions for staff? Thank you. So at this time, we'd ask if the applicant would like to come forward. And please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Kelly Harris with Keystone Engineering, located at 923 South Lowry, here as the applicant tonight, which is unusual for me and exciting. The only thing I can think of is that the office was remodeled in 1995, and it was previously an ODOT maintenance facility. So I think that's probably where the light industrial zoning came from. There is existing CB zoning across the street from us, and then actually on the same side of the street, north of the public zoning, that is CB as well. So we're requesting that we just continue that zoning. The existing building is actually located on the property lines. It's on the west and south property line. So that was the non-conforming in light industrial, and it is typically that's where the buildings are placed in the CB zoning. So we would be complying with the zoning in that district. Grand scheme of things, we want to do a building addition, so we're pretty excited to the north and to the south sides of our building. We went through City Council last night to request a right-of-way closing along 10th Street. Just FYI. Do you have any questions for me?
I don't see any questions. I'll just say thank you for the background on perhaps how the IL got there, because it seemed a little out of character, so that does make sense.
Yes,
Appreciate
yes.
that.
And I noticed that IL is continued to the south, which is obviously developed as residential. So
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, we'd open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in favor this evening of the item. Seeing none, I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience this evening that would like to speak in opposition. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and ask for staff to return with findings and alternatives.
All right, for the findings, the Land Development Code allows for a rezoning of the land via map amendment. The proposed commercial business zoning district is located nearby to the west. The comprehensive plan calls for industrial use in this area. All right, your alternatives: accept findings, recommend approval as requested, find the request is not appropriate, recommend denial, find that additional information or discussion is needed prior to making a recommendation, and table the request to a certain date.
Thank you. Commissioners, anyone thinking about a motion or any discussion?
Without objection, I move to approve the applicant's request.
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the request as submitted. We shall now vote. All votes are in favor, 5-0. Motion passes. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a map amendment. This is map amendment 2207.
All right, the next item on the agenda to be presented is a map amendment for 701 Boomer Lake Station Drive from public and general commercial to multifamily intermediate, or RMI. Here's an area map of the subject property south on Lakeview between Washington/Boomer and North Husband, there in the hash mark. The subject property is located west of the southern portion of Boomer Lake. The subject property used to be the City of Stillwater electric generating station. To the west is LifeNet and Quality Water Service that is along there on Boomer. Here's a street view looking south on the subject property from Lakeview. The subject property is currently zoned public and general commercial. Part of the subject property was rezoned last year at this time to the current zoning. At the time of the rezoning, it was believed that the portion that is considered public is the location where the transformers are, was believed that it was not able to be developed on. Now it's believed to be developed, so they would like to rezone it and develop on that. So that is why we are here. And with that, they would like to extend the RMI zoning over the little panhandle that they created for CG as well. Yep, okay. Here we go. Here's a future land use map from the 2030 comprehensive plan. As you can see, the subject property is proposed to be parks and open space with commercial located to the west and to the south. Kelly Harris with Keystone Engineering is here to represent the applicant on this project. At this time, does the commissioners have any questions for staff?
No questions for staff. Thank you. Okay, at this time, we'd like to have the applicant or the representative come forward and offer any other additional information to the commission.
Yes, Kelly Harris with Keystone Engineering, located at 923 South Lowry, here representing the applicant, which is actually still the city at this point. Jacqueline did a great job. There was a little square that was where the generators are still currently located, but those will be removed. So we wanted to include those into the project, and so we needed that area rezoned. Any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
So at this time, we would open the public hearing, and I will ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this item to please come forward at this time. Seeing no one, I'll ask if there's anyone who would like to speak in opposition of this item. Okay. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing and ask for staff to return to present findings and recommendation, or findings and alternatives.
All right, the findings. The Land Development Code allows for the rezoning of land via map amendment. The proposed map amendment will allow for the additional multifamily dwelling units on the property to be a conforming use. The comprehensive plan calls for commercial use in this area. Alternatives. Accept findings, recommend approval as requested. Find the request is not appropriate, recommend denial. Find the additional information or discussion is needed prior to making a recommendation, and table the request to a certain date.
Thank you. Commissioners, any discussion or perhaps a motion?
Seeing no discussion, without objection, I move to approve the applicant's request.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the request as submitted. We shall now vote. All in favor? Motion passes 5-0. Okay, next item on the agenda is preliminary plat, SUB 22-08.
All right, the next item being presented tonight is a preliminary plat for Quail Meadows Subdivision located at 1413 and 1599 East Lakeview Road. The subject property is located at the northeast corner of Grandview and Quail. What happened? Okay, here we go. Lakeview Ridge and East Ridge are located to the west. Skyline Elementary and the Stillwater Junior High is located to the south of the property, and a little further southeast is Skyline East Subdivision. This is an street view image of the property looking south on Lakeview. Currently undeveloped. There is an oil and gas pump jack located at the southeast corner. As you can see, I'll show you later on the plat. The property is currently zoned with a residential planned unit development. RSS zoning can be found to the west. Agriculture zoning is located to the north and east, with public zoning to the south. The future land use map from the 2030 comprehensive plan proposes that this area to be high-density residential with commercial located on the north side of Lakeview and low-density residential to the west. All right. Here is the preliminary plat. There's approximately 48 residential lots, 2 outlots that are being proposed. Along the, if you can't really see it that well on here, but they're on my right, on the right of the screen. It's block 4, lot 1 through 8 are proposed to be multifamily, and the others are single family over to the left portion of this plat view. And then there to the bottom of the left-hand side is the oil and gas site that was discussed earlier. I think that's it. Kelly Harris is here on behalf of the applicant. Does the commissioners have any questions for staff?
Any questions for staff? Right. We don't have any. Thank you. So at this time, I'd ask if the applicant's representative would like to come forward and share anything with the commission.
Good evening. I'm Kelly Harris with Keystone Engineering, located at 923 South Lowry. Last time, you'll have to hear that tonight. Here representing the owner tonight. In 2009, there was a PUD accepted on this site. The preliminary plat before you tonight does closely align with that accepted PUD. We've met the requirements for stormwater detention as well as separation from that existing oil well. We've already completed a traffic impact analysis, and that has been accepted by city staff. It did not require any updates to existing infrastructure. We are proposing one public access point to Grandview There we go. Grandview is along the top of your screen here, so we've got this one public access point here, and then another along Quail, which is to the left of your screen, located here. These 4 lots located in this upper right-hand corner along Grandview, those are duplex lots, and we are proposing, and it was actually cited in the PUD, that those lots be accessed from the rear, so they will not have driveways onto Grandview. They'll have one private drive located closer to Lakeview here, and then they would have their garage or parking areas along the backside. That's the overall view of it. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions from the commissioners?
So, one of the maps showed that this entire rectangle in the map was part of the preliminary plat, but much of it is not. There's no plans for construction.
The large
Is that
lot, the large lot up front, is that where you're speaking about?
On Lakeview?
Yes.
that-
So in the approved PUD, that is planned to be apartments.
Okay.
That was approved through that 2009 PUD.
Okay.
Right now, we're just looking to plat the development and put in the infrastructure that's needed for that. So any development that goes into that Lot 1, I believe it's Block 5 in that large lot, would have to come through as a commercial use by right. So staff would review those construction documents specifically for that site.
And the pump jack is going to more or less be permanent. That's not going to be changed.
Well, they're under discussions to relocate it, but at this time, we have to design around it, so
Okay.
that's the spacing requirements.
And the land around it says for drainage and utility, so I presume that's to keep any drainage from going off the property, is that
Yes,
correct?
so there'll be
Okay.
a detention facility located in that outlot, as well as a secondary one that's located on that large Lot 1, Block 5. It's not shown as an outlot, there's just a drainage easement proposed over that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I don't see any, thank you.
Let me know if anything else comes up.
All right. So at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone in the audience this evening that would like to speak in favor of this item. Seeing no one, I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience this evening that would like to speak in opposition. All right, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Gary Parlay, I'm 1601 East Lakeview, and I'm really not in opposition. I'm just want to kind of voice my concerns. One of my big concerns is the drainage issue. Behind my house, I have a big pond, and one of the things that I think we need to do is make sure the drainage pond is built before, not after all the work's done. I've watched Skyline from my house and watched it fill up the pond across the street on Jardot, and I really feel like that when you take the grass and the trees off of that place, it's going to cause a lot more water to come across my place, because all that has to drain to the east, and both of it from the north to the south both comes to my pond. And so the drainage is the biggest concern that I've got. Plus, I would like for the city to require them to put some type of a barrier between my property and this property, so the trash, that pond of mine has had so much trash from Skyline blow into it. I mean, we've had house wrap, we've had plastic. We baled that hay last year, and we fed it and just picked up sacks and sacks full of trash out of that hay before the cattle ate them. And that's some of my concerns. I'm not against the project, but I would like for for the ponds and the detention to be built first, not last. Because when you start the dirt work, you're going to have a lot of runoff. So that's my concerns. And Kelly's been real helpful. I visited with her. I've talked to Andy, and so they've been very helpful. And I just want to tell you that.
Okay, great, thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, at this time, I'll ask if there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in opposition. I don't see any. Okay, we'll close the public hearing and have the opportunity for the applicant to come back if you would like to comment on any of the requests made.
Thank you.
Are you still at 923 South Lowry?
I promised I wouldn't say it again. So the detentions will be built first. I believe if it's not in the code already, the city staff is working to implement that requirement as well. So those will go in first. As far as trash, I hate to hear that, it's being baled and fed to animals. So I will pass that along to the owner and see what we can do. Anything else?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
You said there'll be provisions for drainage. Is the objective to make sure that no more water runs off the property than runs off the property currently?
Correct.
So it will not change drainage outside of the boundaries?
Correct.
Okay.
Ms. Harris, one more thing. So there was another concern addressed by another resident. I don't know if it's
It's not the same.
okay. And you had a chance to review that as well.
We did,
So
and it pertained to
and
trash
debris is
as
the common
well.
thing, right?
That person is located west of the site along Swim. So Swim and Grandview, with those houses being built over there. So we will do our best.
Very good. Thank you.
Another question. Could
Sure.
you say any more about the PUD? Who participates in it and when it was put together?
So it was accepted by the city in 2009. It was a previous owner of the property that put that through. What else do you?
Well, anything relevant. I was completely unaware of it. How many
Okay.
who participated in it? What were the objectives?
So it actually proposed more residential lots than we are proposing now. We had to decrease the amount of residential lots due to the spacing requirements away from the oil well.
Oh.
And so that put in allowed for a larger detention facility right there. So we've decreased the density. Other than that, it's pretty well the same.
And the PUD applies to this entire rectangle that was in the map?
Yes.
Okay, and it's permanent, I guess, until it's
It is.
changed?
Yes.
Okay.
It had previous preliminary plats approved through the city, but nothing was built, and so those expired. However, the PUD doesn't expire, so it stayed, and so we've just designed to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I think that's it.
Thank
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to have staff return and present findings and alternatives.
All right, our findings: the proposed preliminary plat meets the subdivision zoning and PUD requirements. Subdivisions over 30 lots are required by code to provide 2 points of access to the development. The C3 plan recommends high-density residential use at this location. Alternatives: accept findings, recommend approval as requested, find the request is not appropriate, recommend denial, find that the additional information or discussion is needed prior to making a recommendation, and table the request to a certain date.
I do have one question for staff, and it's on the common request here about keeping up with trash and debris that might blow around. Do we currently have anything on the books for the city of Stillwater that would provide some kind of mechanism for someone who's building a home to be held responsible to clean up after themselves, to not have things blow out off the properties on which they're working?
So what they take for residential, for developments, they have for silt and runoff regulating, there's nothing for debris and trash that is in place. Only for like commercial we do for screening and such purposes. But since it's residential, abutting a residential use or a residential neighborhood, that there was not any type of screening or anything in place at this time.
Okay. And these are all residential, so that would be up to the individual residential builder who's under construction at the time, because they're the ones who have control over those items. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
So there is no enforcement mechanism then?
There is code enforcement if there's a large amount of junk that when we refer to the code, which is the code enforcement aspect of it. But as for the development side, there is not. But if there's excessive amount of junk and that kind of stuff, we can enforce, just not like loose debris that I believe that they're referencing. There is not.
Okay, I have another question. And I don't really expect an answer at this time, but I've heard ad nauseum over many cases that in drainage issues, there is not allowed to be more runoff than currently exists at the site, correct?
Correct.
So how is that measured? Okay, that's why I'm saying I would really like to know, because we've had recently issues related to drainage.
Right, and that's more, really it's down to numbers with engineering, and they have their own formulas and everything that track based on slope and contours and what they have predicted over certain rainfalls, that kind of stuff. There's a formula for all of it.
There's a formula. Do they actually do that measurement?
Yes, Kelly.
The answer is yes. I mean, they're going to be required to do hydrology and hydraulics reports. I mean, they're gonna have to submit that information, and then if we require as-built afterwards, then that documentation will be supporting that.
So we do go out and survey and as-built the detention facilities and provide that volume that's supposed to be either met or increased from the original drainage study. The way I understand your question, you're wondering if somebody actually goes out there and measures the rainfall leaving the site?
Exactly.
No.
Okay. And that's not only prior to, but after the development is built out, there is no measurement taken to verify that it's less than what existed previously.
Correct. It's purely based on models.
Okay, thanks for the explanation.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions for staff?
If I could address one other thing, and that is, do you mind if I jump in?
Go for it.
Okay, and that is the question with regard to the excess trash and things like that. I mean, you know, our inspectors on site actually do have the ability to go out and address some of these issues with the builders. I mean, if it becomes a huge problem, I mean, my request would be that you notify the city of Stillwater if you're having a significant problem with that. And especially if the city has issued building permits, you know, it absolutely is possible for us to issue a stop work order if they're not keeping the site clean and if it's creating a big problem. So we have a number of tools in our toolbox to address that. So it's disappointing to hear that's happening, and if it continues on, just be sure and let us know.
I appreciate hearing that, and that was really my intent for the initial question, is that there are other mechanisms beyond the planning process that we're looking at this evening, planning and zoning process and approving the preliminary plats, that allow for control and follow-up of the trash and debris that's coming onto your property. Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Kind of along those lines, though, on the other topic of detentions, my concern, I guess, is that it was mentioned that they will be built first, and it sounds like the desire of everyone, but sometimes plans change, and if that, what keeps that for something happening that makes it to where it's beneficial to not do that first? How does that, I mean, is the homeowner's concern was raised I mean, all they have to go on right now is that we said that it's just going to be built first. So is there anything else?
Would you like for me to answer, or do you want to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Are you talking about, like the runoff to ensure that? Okay. There is a multi-layer approach, and review that goes on by the city of Stillwater. So like, for example, the preliminary plat is the first step, okay? Because, we set everything out. They then have to, they will present, the plat has already been presented to city staff and engineering in particular, and they're going to review it. Kelly will have submitted her H&H, the hydraulics and hydrology. They'll review it to ensure that there's sufficient on-site detention to capture all the rainfall, especially if they're developing that area, regardless of what the development is. But throughout the entire process, I mean, they're not going to issue any permits, any earth change permits or any other permits until they are satisfied that certain criteria in accordance with recognized standards have been met. And so, of course, the baseline is, okay, you can't increase the amount of runoff. So throughout the process, you're going to have city inspectors on site. Not all the time, but they are going to go through the process, and then they'll have the city inspectors come on to ensure that the public infrastructure is being, be it a detention pond or whatever, is being built in accordance with city standards and in accordance with the plans that have been approved by engineering and construction. If they deviate from those plans, or if they fail to ensure that they, being the developer, is doing that, then they have the ability to issue a stop work order. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll go back to the builder or the developer and they'll say, okay, we have some concerns, the pond's not big enough. We ran into this issue in Broken Arrow. Now, granted, it was an issue where the subdivision was actually built to county standards, and then it was ultimately annexed in. Well, it turns out that the stormwater system was grossly undersized. And so the good thing is the city of Stillwater has a lot of safeguards in place, i.e. the inspectors, the engineering review, to ensure that it's being built in accordance with the models. So it is something that, first of all, you've got a very, very good staff here. Let me plug for City of Stillwater staff and the engineering department and planning and zoning. They all work diligently to ensure that things are being done in accordance with the plans and in accordance with recognized standards. And if they're not, then they're going to stop it and go back to the drawing board. And of course, that's also the purpose of the final plat approval, because at that point, you want to ensure that everything has been done the way it said it would be done. Because ultimately, a lot of the infrastructure is going to be dedicated to the city of Stillwater. We don't want to accept it unless we're sure it's been built in accordance with standards, because, the city doesn't want to have to come in and upgrade the sanitary sewer system or the stormwater system or the road or anything else, because, we don't have the financial resources to do that, and it's the developer's responsibility to do that. So I want to reiterate that it isn't just like we go, oh yeah, here's a permit, good luck. There's a constant state of review.
Well, I was looking for, and I think you provided it, just a reassurance to the concern of the homeowner that there is a method that if someone says something's going to happen, then there's things in place to make sure that happens.
I believe that to be true.
Any other questions for staff? I don't see any. Thank you. Commissioners, is anyone entertaining a motion or more discussion amongst the commission?
I move to accept
Okay, got a motion?
preliminary plat as presented.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second to accept the preliminary plat. We shall now vote. Motion passes 5-0. All right. The next two items on the agenda, item E and item F, are being requested to be tabled. Believe that there's some additional information that needs to be generated before those are really ready for our review. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to table the item E, Remington Properties LLC, care of LTS Engineering Services, the preliminary plat SUB 22-09. I believe we need to table it to a date certain. And I will ask staff, are we looking at the next meeting scheduled is July 12th?
Northbrook needs to be withdrawn because they.
Oh, it
they
needs to be withdrawn?
Yeah, that one needs to be withdrawn because they have to do a traffic impact study.
Okay.
Then I wouldn't recommend taking any action off that.
Okay,
They
so
understand
just-
they're going to have to re-advertise, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so, so we won't take any action on it, on item E. Okay, so then item F, we do want to table item F,
Yes,
correct?
please.
Okay. So we're looking at a date certain.
Uh,
It's okay.
That item can be tabled.
Okay, so we can table that to a date certain, so is the July 12th date agreeable?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to table item F, Keystone Engineering and Surveying preliminary plat SUB 22-11.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to table item F to the July 12th date. All in favor? Motion passes. That item is tabled. I believe at this time, council wanted to make a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to note that, that the applicant's representative was in agreement to tabling it to the next meeting, and so they will stipulate to the 60 days, right? Beginning effective July the 12th, because you have to review and take action. The first time you consider it, you only have 60 days to do it unless the applicant or the representative stipulates to extending the time. So I just wanted the record to reflect that.
Very good. All right, moving on with the agenda. The next item on the agenda is to review and have possible action on the meeting summary for the regular meeting of June the 7th. Okay. I did have one item in it that I had requested to have staff change, and that was let me get back to it here. There was a reference on page 2 of 3, the last item on there, it noted Commissioner Shanahan as vice chair, and they're changing that to Commissioner Shanahan rather than vice chair. I thought perhaps you'd moved up.
I second that.
All right, so do I hear a motion to approve the minutes with that correction?
I move we approve the minutes with the addition that the chair suggested.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes with the amendment as noted. We shall now vote. Motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is presentation by special counsel of the City Attorney's Office regarding state statutes, the Stillwater's Code of Ordinances, the Zoning Code, and cases of interest on planning and zoning matters.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about an individual by the name of Suzette Kelo. And Miss Kelo was a nurse, and she lived in along the Thames River, along the Long Island Sound. And back in 1997, It was actually, I think it was New London, Connecticut, was where it was. Well, she had dreamed for many, many years of living in a home that overlooked the water. And so she lovingly restored this beautiful pink home. And it was kind of interesting because the people that lived down the street from her, their family had lived along that particular area since 1895. And the family, the area, they were very close knit. In comes Pfizer, and adjacent to the city of New London, they decided to come in and build a plant, a big, gigantic plant. And so the city of New London said, okay, we know all you people enjoy living here, but we're going to condemn your land or use eminent domain to take your land as an economic development activity, because here we've got big Pfizer coming in and we want to be able to do something with this land in order to stimulate economic development. So Suzette, the nurse, kind of like the preacher that we talked about last week, she held out and said, I don't believe that you have the ability to take my property. And so it went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. And she argued, or her attorneys argued, that taking her home for purposes of economic development wasn't for a public use. And in a 5-4 decision by the United States Supreme Court, they said, yes, we believe that economic development is a valid reason for municipalities and states to take private property. Well, that resulted in opening the floodgates of legislation, local legislation pertaining to eminent domain. And there was a case, and I believe it was out of the city of Muskogee, and the city of Muskogee wanted to build a plant, but in order to well, I mean, it was a private business that was, and it was a great deal. They were going to create many jobs. They needed a water line easement. And so the city was prepared to file an eminent domain action against the landowners, so only for a water line. I mean, they weren't even taking anybody's house. It was just, we got to get more water here. And so the landowner stood firm and said, no, you don't have the ability to do it. Went all the way up to the Oklahoma Supreme Court. Well, what's interesting about Oklahoma is our Constitution actually says that you can't condemn property. We use condemnation, but you can't utilize eminent domain for purposes of economic development. And so that the court said, no, Muskogee, you can't put your water line here, which I thought was kind of interesting, because you would think that would be a little bit really, I mean, we didn't really take anybody's house. I mean, it was just an easement, but the Oklahoma Supreme Court said no. But the legislature, not to be dissuaded from any positive ruling by the Supreme Court, decided to go ahead and pass a fleet of laws that really narrowly tailored cities' ability to annex and utilize eminent domain and things like that. But it was kind of interesting. I always like to go back on these big Supreme Court cases and kind of take a look and see, okay, well, what's the rest of the story? Well, it turned out that after this went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, that I think that the end of the day, they ended up wanting to build some apartments on the land that they condemned. So it was, I'm sure that was super frustrating for Ms. Kelo. But anyway, it was just, I like looking at some of those cases. And so it's just, the good thing is when people start asking about, we here in Oklahoma, we can't utilize eminent domain for purposes of economic development. Now, we can for public purposes like water lines, streets, things like that. Well, I mean, which is important. I mean, we've got to, and there's a set statutory process by which we can do that. But, you know, currently platting is the way that we receive most of our public infrastructure.
Ms. Child's question, please. What's the name of that case? The Pfizer case that went to the U.S. Supreme
It
Court?
is Kelo versus City of New London, and it's Kelo. Yeah, I've got a picture of her. There she is. She looks very serious right there, which I don't blame her. If somebody took my pink house, I'd be mad too. So,
So also, question number 2. So under the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, it does provide for government taking land for economic development. How does the state government supersede that if the Oklahoma law says, no, you can't, but the U.S. Constitution says, yes, you can?
well, I mean, and I haven't looked at that case in a very, very long time, so I don't know that I could necessarily go into the specifics of it, but I did feel fairly confident that the legal analysis that the Oklahoma Supreme Court utilized was firm in that, you know, here in Oklahoma, you can't do that. And, you know, I kind of think that part of the reason for that, boy, you're really going back into the depths, but I think that part of the reason for that is because the Oklahoma Supreme Court and the Oklahoma District Courts, they are the ones that would have jurisdiction over those types of actions. So, for example, if it had been a filed in federal court, like if you were dealing with a recognized tribe or some allotted land or some other way that you got into federal court, then that would likely outweigh.
So this is neither here nor there, but so I personally was involved in a eminent domain case that acquired 173 homes to build the Dallas Cowboys football stadium. So we used the Fifth Amendment for that, and the holdouts had to no longer hold out. So it was fascinating to have a seat at the table to watch that process go through.
You know, and that is interesting because, I mean, was this, just out of curiosity, was the stadium owned by the city of Dallas or by some other public entity?
So it was 2/3 of it was owned by Jerry Jones, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. 1/3 of it is owned by the city of Arlington, Texas.
Okay, then that would be, yeah, that's probably how they went about doing it. I mean, and that's probably, I don't know what the Texas Constitution says, but that's probably how they got around it.
Yep.
Was, you know, claiming ownership by that. But, and I do think that the court, my recollection of the Kelo case was they did go into quite a bit of discussion about, you know, the fact that this was a private company and that, you know, so, I mean, if the city of Arlington maintained some ownership, then yeah, I think that may actually have gotten them where they needed to go, so.
Yeah.
Great discussion, thank you. Next item on the agenda is miscellaneous items from staff, planning commissioners, or the city attorney for discussion and possible action. The one item we have listed is that the next planning commission meeting will be July 12th. And the last item is adjournment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Without objection, move to adjourn.
A second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. We shall now vote. Motion passes 5-0. We are now adjourned.